Hey there! I'm a grants manager at the Office of State Budget and Management. My team and I are here to help grant recipients successfully use directed grant funds in compliance with state laws and regulations. The key to success for grant recipients is knowing what it says in the Appropriations Act in which the grant was made. It's important to know what the legislature wants you to do with the money. We include this language and list it as your grant description in the initial email notification we send out about your grant. If you are unfamiliar with the legislative process, ask your grant administrator. There are some other rules about state grants found in state law and the administrative code. The grant agreement and our staff can help you navigate those. We've helped organizations across the state achieve all sorts of goals with their state grants. Things like purchasing safety equipment, refurbishing soup kitchens, improving community spaces, preserving historic buildings, and creating access to nature. If your organization has received a grant administered by OSBM and a recent State Appropriations Act, I'm sure we can help you too.
What if our organization has already spent money on the grant-funded project? Can we use the grant money to reimburse the organization?
You can if the expenses were paid in the same fiscal year in which the funds were appropriated or awarded. So, if you received grant funds in January, but you had an expense related to the approved grant project between July 1st and December 31st, then you can submit those expenses toward the grant funds that you are awarded.
What if we want to use the grant funds for staffing?
In most cases, it's fine if the staffing costs are directly related to the grant project. It would be best if the staff funded by the grant were dedicated exclusively to the grant project. It also always depends on the purpose of your grant and its grant description.
Can we use grant funds to award grants to other organizations?
Yes, you can use state grants to award funds to subrecipients as long as their activities align with the purpose in the Appropriations Act and your grant description. All subrecipients must follow the rules and reporting requirements. It is your organization's responsibility to gather the required information about how the subrecipients use the funds and report that information to OSBM.
We won't be able to start our grant project for a while. Can we invest the grant money so we have more to spend when we are ready? Do we need to report the earnings?
You can put the grant funds in an interest-earning bank account. Interest earnings are reported in the required quarterly report. The interest earnings must be used for the same purpose as the grant funds. However, you may not put grant funds in a brokerage account or investment such as stocks, mutual funds, or bonds.
Is there a limit on how much of the grant funds we can use for services or administrative costs if the grant is for capital improvements?
Use your grant agreement as a guide. Some services and administrative costs are to be expected in capital improvement projects. These should be clearly connected to the funded project. The Appropriations Act in which your grant was included may also provide guidance on this. As always, you can reach out to your grant administrator at OSBM for counsel or to answer any questions.
We aren't sure we want to do the grant project anymore. How do we change what we plan to use the funds for?
Any changes to the purpose of your grant must be made in legislation. We may only administer grants for the purpose provided in the Appropriation Act. Please contact your state legislator to request changes to the purpose, scope, or amount of your grant. The answer to these questions and many more can be found on the OSBM website. If your organization has received a directed grant administered by OSBM, don't hesitate to reach out to your grants team with questions.